If you are subscribed to the RNT Fitness podcast, then happy Wednesday to you, because you've probably got a notification come through and you're listening to this on the day it was published because, of course, you're eager to learn and listen to us. Well, that's the theory. If you haven't already subscribed, then you're missing out. And happy day to you, whatever day it is. The moral of this is hit subscribe. Thank you. Anyway, on to the episode. So this week was kind of a bit of it was a personal one for Akash and I, as in like we got some personal enjoyment out of it, as well as like a bit of a trip down memory lane, bit of nostalgia, because it's a guy called David Johnston, who's based in the US, and he is actually, or was the co-host of the first and one of the only podcasts that I used to listen to back in the day. So I kind of tried listening to podcasts, found some of them a bit dry, and then I was told about this one called Geared Up. So I decided to listen to it once on one of my commutes, and I was in stitches and hooked. Both David and the other co-host had this, it sounds cheesy, but this cool chemistry, where the other guy was just very laid back, didn't take anything seriously, full of one-liners, whereas David also brings an element of humor, but more dark and twisted, kind of like mine. But also some solid pearls of wisdom, lots of training knowledge, his background into and knowledge into bodybuilding history is pretty damn impressive. So for Akash and I to sort of geek out, it was pretty cool to listen to back then. Each episode would be roughly 3 hours long, which would tide us over for our cardio sessions for a good few days. And then when we would get to the gym, we would sort of discuss the podcast. So to be able to have David on was really cool. Although he's now wound down doing the podcast, he's focusing on his one-on-one coaching business, his online coaching business, Team Warrior Within. And he's just an all-around cool guy to listen to. Very kind of black and white, doesn't buy into trends, doesn't follow the current trends. So I think you guys will enjoy this one. We discuss, of course, training, we touch on diet, but this is more like lifestyle. So I hope you enjoy. So Dave, for those listening to this that hadn't had the privilege of listening to Geared Up in the golden era, I like to call it, back in the day when I first started listening to it.
Sure.
Who is David Johnston? So Akash and I are big fans, right? But for those that perhaps you don't have a huge social media presence, do you? You like to keep things kind of under the radar a little bit. So.
Yeah, to be honest, I've done social media insofar as I kind of feel that I've had to do social media and play the game, just to be kind of out there and relevant in the fitness industry. As you guys both know, the fitness industry is very, very heavily, involved with social media and influenced by it back and forth. Who is David Johnston? Well, first of all, for anyone that, is interested in checking out the Geared Up podcast, I believe all the old episodes are still available on the website. You can check them out. It's been running for coming up on 3.5 years now. So, it's had quite a long run. A lot of interesting characters that we interviewed over the years. If you're interested in, professional bodybuilding or kind of fitness at a high level, lots of great information there. And, the camaraderie that we used to have and bring to the table. Myself personally, let's see, I'm 38 years old. I didn't play sports or anything growing up. I was more of an art kid. I was a musician. So I started playing the drums when I was really young, 8, 9 years old. And I was in a lot of rock and roll bands and heavy metal bands. But usually the people, I don't want to stereotype too much, but usually people that, come more from that line, a little more involved in partying and, possibly some recreational drug use. I kind of skated away from that, naturally, just because of my upbringing. I saw that it didn't lead to a lot of good stuff. So I was always a pretty driven person and very focused. Whatever I did, I really tried to give my all. Most people would describe me as very intense, very passionate about what I do. So that was my childhood. I was always kind of the leader of the group, the leader of the band. And, if we went to a party and everyone was drinking, I was the guy holding people's hairs back while they were throwing up, the responsible one, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I got a little older, went off to college, still wasn't into fitness at all, still didn't play sports at all. But I came from a blue collar family. So my dad was a garbage truck driver and, we weren't very well off. So very hard working, just really had to kind of work harder than the average person, if you will, to get where we wanted to get.
Yep.
And, on top of that, I was born, I was 10 pounds at birth. My brother was 9'11". We were always husky. We were always heavy and overweight, It didn't factor as much for me as it does for a lot of people, only because, again, we were more interested and invested in like the arts than we were in, say, being the beautiful people. I wasn't one of these like clean cut preppy kids, so it didn't matter as much to me that I didn't have all the beautiful clothes, the trendy stuff. I was kind of counterculture from a pretty young age. But I got a lot of jobs in high school and after high school that were more hardworking, working class, if you will. And it's funny, I've always been, for anyone that's listening that does know competitive bodybuilding, you guys know that I'm a huge Dorian Yates fan. We were going to name our son Dorian Shadow if we had a son. With a daughter instead, Ravensthorn. But I mean, I was actually cleared to name our child Dorian Shadow. And bear in mind, my daughter's coming up on 9 years old, so this was before Dorian had his most recent I'm hip and enlightened phase that he's been going through these last couple of years. I always had that real deep connection with kind of Dorian and his background. So he put out that interview not too long ago where he detailed his upbringing, coming from that working class family, and how he was very independent minded, kind of did his own thing, learned everything he did by reading rather than by talking to people. I was really similar. I was very studious, kind of bookwormish. When I finally got into bodybuilding, I didn't, join a gym and get taken under other people's wings. Rather, I spent a year just reading, Muscular Development magazine cover to cover and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding and just taking notes and kind of putting together a game plan, if you will. So, I went off to college, and actually my degree is in philosophy of all things because I wanted to teach. I started getting into philosophy heavily, probably in my mid-teens, just because, again, background, kind of a lot of fighting within the family, and we were broke and we were struggling, pretty simple. And so I always wanted to figure out why we were different from the other families that all seemed to get along and smile and go to church and all that crap. So that influenced me a lot, and I got into psychology and philosophy, majored in it, wanted to go on to a PhD program. To be honest, I poured myself into it so much as an undergraduate that I kind of burnt myself out by the end. I mean, I did very, very well. Could have probably gone off anywhere I wanted. The girl I was dating through college got a full ride to Yale University, and it's one of the top Ivy League schools in the world. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I finished up college and said, all right, I don't know what I'm going to do. And started working again as a furniture mover just to pay the bills. So very brutal grunt work, blue collar work, and started losing some of the fat I'd accumulated sitting on my butt in college and building some muscle from that. And I said, all right, it's time to figure this out. I'd grown up watching professional wrestling in the States with Hulk Hogan and all those guys. And I'd grown up watching all the Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone movies from the 80s. I was enamored with bodybuilding, but I just wasn't, a part of that world. So around the age of 22, 23 after college, I just poured myself into learning it as thoroughly as I could. Like I said, read and just took notes for a year, and then bought a real cheap weight set for the basement and got to work. And in that first year, I lost 60 pounds of scale weight, but it was probably about 75 pounds of fat while, putting on quite a bit of muscle in my first year. And I was good at it. So my coworkers, again, they were just furniture movers, just blue collar guys, said, hey, can I come home with you and work out today? And can you help me? Started helping people, started helping my family members, and finally said, wow, I'm good at this. People make money doing this. So I started studying to become a personal trainer. This was probably back in 2003. And 2004, I became a personal trainer just at a box gym, a commercial gym called Export in Chicago, Illinois. And did that out of Chicago from fall of 04 until spring of 08. So about 3.5 years, maybe 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And then my wife and I got married. Nikki got married in spring of 08 and got an invite to move out to the Baltimore area with our boss for Lifetime Fitness to kind of help rebuild the personal training staff, if you will, clean it up a little bit. So we did that and just built a really good presence there starting in 08. 2 years in, I went independent starting spring of 2010. And, I'd been competing in bodybuilding. I did my first show in 07. So I was starting to get more involved in the competition side. And it was really the perfect storm in 2010. I built enough of a reputation, had a small following. Social media was really just kind of starting to take off. So I was in a perfect position where I built my reputation organically, without having to advertise or, do the Instagram thing. I was never Insta famous. And it was really nice because when social media really hit, I already had a library of transformations and people that I'd helped, plus a lot of written materials, motivational blogs, stuff like that. And, we started taking off faster and faster. As you guys know, started geared up fall of 13. I was already running a million miles an hour by that point. So I told Adam Mcvey, who runs the show, it's your baby. And we had an agreement. I'm just showing up to hang out. And we had a really good relationship with that. And here we are, several years later. So I want to talk for a full hour and a half and drown you with details, but that's the nuts and bolts of it.
No, it's pretty well rounded and varied. Let's get the bodybuilding stuff out the way first, because predominantly that's why we've got you on. What drew you? So you mentioned obviously that you've competed in bodybuilding, but what drew you toward it? Like, was it watching Dorian? Is there a specific moment where it clicked?
No, it's funny if you're talking what drew me towards being a bodybuilder as in a competitive bodybuilder, or being a bodybuilder as in just kind of living the lifestyle.
No. What made you think the first time you want to get on stage?
Sure. Yeah. When I got started with all this, I had no aspirations to compete. If you would have asked me, I wouldn't have even thought it was a possibility. Like I said, I'd been overweight my whole life. I just wanted to be less fat and more muscular, and I kept it really simple. I kept it at that. And when I started training, I loved it. I loved the process, and I loved pushing myself and the discipline, and knowing that every day I was striving towards, getting a little farther. And the other thing I think is, having been counterculture most of my life, having always kind of stood apart from the pack, I liked having that little chip on my shoulder where other people looked at me like I was weird for bringing my tuna fish with me. And I kind of reveled in it. I reveled in the idea that I was willing to do something that other people weren't willing to do. So it wasn't until I'd been doing that for about a year and a half before I started working my first gym. And I started working my first gym, and there was a Muscle Mania pro who worked there named Anthony Velacci. And there was a high-level NPC national super heavyweight who was my fitness director named Reggie Anderson. And there were a couple other guys that were, recreationally into competing, but I'd never really been around competitors before. And I kind of got self-conscious just because they were a lot more advanced than me. So working my first gym, I said, all right, I'm going to diet down and really get ripped. Not like lean, but I'm going to get ripped. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I just put together my own game plan and pushed myself really hard for 4 months. And I do a set of pictures afterwards. I was very happy. I put on a Speedo and did my best to do some poses, recreating the pictures I'd hung up on my wall of Arnold, Jay Cutler, and Ronnie Coleman, all those guys.
Yep.
And my coworkers looked at me, these guys who were already pretty vested in competing. And they said, wow, you look good. You're really lean. Have you ever thought about competing? I said, no, not really. And they kind of planted the idea in my head. And they said, all right, well, you look really good. You're definitely lean and you have the discipline, but you need to be bigger, because I'm 6'1". And I was probably only 207 pounds at that time. So back then, if they'd had men's physique, I probably would have, considered doing it. I would have the build that would have been appropriate, but I knew I needed to be bigger. So I took 2 more years. I put on more size, dieted down again, put on size 1 more time, dieted down again. Finally, spring of 2007, I was ready for it. But what really drew me to it was just the idea of I liked pushing myself and seeing how far I could push myself. And competing gave me kind of a specified avenue for doing that, a structure for doing that, if you will. Like a specific timeline, a specific standard. I was never as drawn to trying to, win, so to speak, because I didn't come from a competitive background. So I was very competitive with myself, not so much competitive with other people. And because of that, you've heard this a million times from different people, but I loved my prep for that first show. And then the day of the show, it really kind of took the wind out of my sails. I did well. I took second place in the open heavyweights, which it was an all natural drug tested show. And I was still, drug free at that point. For first prep, I had to lose almost 80 pounds for that prep. So it was pretty crazy. Yeah, I was very overweight when I started the prep because I was trying to grow way too fast, and I didn't know what I was doing.
But, how many shows did you do natural? David, how many shows? How many shows did you do natural?
3. My first 3 shows. My first show, I decided, based on all my reading, I wanted to build a natural foundation because that's what all the pros said to do. And I knew that I was only 24, 25. I wanted to prove that I knew how to train. I wanted to prove that I had the discipline to diet. I wanted to, show that I had what it takes, even though I had planned from the start to probably, become enhanced at some point. Mm-hmm. So that first show, natural, and that was a natural NPZ show. And then my second 2 shows were in fall of 2008. I hadn't actually planned to compete at that point because that's my first show. I got married. We were trying to have a kid. I had shoulder surgery that was real minor. And then we moved to Maryland and we started dieting just to get in shape. I said, the Maryland State's 8 weeks after the 12-week diet. Let's do that. It'll help with my visibility in the area and all that. So that's when I stepped on a state level NPC show, natural, and kind of got my butt kicked pretty hard. And then 2 weeks later, I flew back to Chicago and competed with Adam in a NPC show in Chicago that was not natural as well. But, I did all right. I took third in the open heavies and second in the novice heavies, for natural. And I did all my own prep for that show. So I was starting to experiment with, peaking protocols and how to dry out and stuff like that. So, my goals for that second year were just to come in with far better conditioning and symmetry, which I accomplished. My stage weight was the exact same, 210 pounds.
You were 210 pounds on stage, natural.
Yeah,
that's
but I'm 6'1". I'm 6'1", and I have a big bone structure, really big bone structure. So it wasn't, but the point is, I was really pleased. I created a V taper. I had a full six pack. I had some striations in my quads. I had faint striations in my glutes. Like, I knew I was on the path. You know what I mean? And that's what mattered to me. So, and then at the very end of that prep is when my wife got pregnant. I said, "Hallelujah! Last natural show. It's time to see what I can do." So really, it was just the draw to the push, and kind of the lifestyle. I really always had a lot of respect for anyone who could do that and push that hard. And it's funny, we've gotten to a very cynical era in bodybuilding where it's all about drug use and all this crap. And it was never about that for me in the beginning. Even that all natural pro, Anthony Bellacci, he would always have a black number written on his hands, like 27, 28. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, that's how many days out I am for my show. And every morning I look up and I look at that. Every moment of my day is defined, by thinking about what I have to do." And that was just really cool to me. It was cool to create purpose, if you will, So that was all it was. It wasn't glitz and glamour or anything like that. I wanted to know that I could do it. I'd known how well I'd done in music and how well I'd done in school. And that was to take that same work ethic and apply it to something physical.
It's a similar mindset to how I got into it. I never planned on competing in bodybuilding either. I had a leg operation when I was younger, was in a wheelchair for 8 weeks, non-weight bearing, pins and plates in my knees, came back into the gym to try and just sort of rehab myself. This was about 16 years old. And then I just kind of thought, what's the quickest way of adding muscle tissue to my frame and regaining lost tissue? Bodybuilders, right?
Right.
So I started buying Flex magazines, would follow the workouts in there. And then I was just happy just doing my thing. And I had this guy, I'd never really looked into competitive bodybuilding. And then this guy that was training at my gym had won the British lightweights title sort of 2 years in a row. His girlfriend, Michelle, had won the women's overall. He said to me, for only at this point, I think I was 18 years old. So you seem to respond quite well to training. If you thought about competing. Right. And similar to you, at first it was kind of like, am I good enough? And then I thought, screw it, I'll give it a go. And much like you, it was that, I had so many people asking me, why are you doing it? Getting on stage and this and that. And for me, it wasn't about like the actual getting on stage bit. I actually don't enjoy that much. For me, it's more the process mentally of knowing that other people can't take themselves to those dark places, so to speak. Much like you said, you like being that outlier, that person that gets looked at with the tuner and doing what other people can't. It's a shame nowadays because a lot of our business is found on Instagram, and I get quite a few as you can imagine, female competitors wanting to compete in bikini, and their reasons for doing so are the complete opposite to you and I. They're doing it for Instagram likes and followers. And when the going gets tough, this is me generalizing, of course, but when the going gets tough, that doesn't carry you through. And this is the difference I'm seeing at the moment. I don't know if you've noticed the same.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think for me, it was even more pronounced because when I do something, I'm really almost too invested in it, to the point where it starts to be a negative thing. It can be. But meaning specifically, like when I saw my body get in shape, I tried to get in shape a couple times when I was younger, didn't know what I was doing with diet and all that. So once I finally did it in my early 20s, like it was so exciting to me. It was so cool. I was like, wow, I can control who I am, directly with just a little extra effort, and it was almost like I wanted to share that with people, not my own progress, but I wanted to show other people like, hey, look what you can do. People who had been overweight their whole life or had self-esteem issues, And honestly, that's why I went into personal training. It was really exciting to share that with people. But at the same time, you don't share it by telling them, oh, it's going to be easy. And, it's about busting your ass. It's about working hard.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for helping someone else to achieve their best, to achieve the best within them. It gives you almost a high. It gives you this gratitude, this awesome feeling. So I was doing that with everyday people in the beginning. And that allowed me to kind of turn everyday people into what looked like people who could compete. Before competition was a really big popular thing. It really changed in 2010 because that's when they introduced bikini, women's physique, and men's physique.
Yeah.
So I'd been a trainer for 6 years before that. And back then I kind of proselytized for competition, meaning anyone who looked like they had the potential, I would try to talk them into it and say, have you ever considered doing this? You'd really get a lot out of it. It would teach you a lot about yourself because we love it and we wanted to share it with other people, kind of grow the sport, if you will. Mm-hmm. And the sport was always grown like that. It wasn't grown through marketing and TV and Instagram. It was kind of, you pass the torch to the next generation, if you will.
Exactly that. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's how I got into bodybuilding, right? It was Adam who said to me, we used to work together, and Adam said to me, I'll compete in a powerlifting meet with you if you compete in bodybuilding next year, because I think you've got potential for it. So
right, and what you're doing is it's like having a good training partner. You're all helping each other to strive towards your best or whatever. And then when it changed in 2010, it definitely changed that quite a bit. It's become a lot more commercial now. By me being in the industry for a living as a trainer, competing obviously helps complement that because it shines a light on it, so it goes back and forth. But I was always a trainer first and then a competitor second. And I didn't compete for the sake of promoting my business, but they ran independently, but of course they complement one another. In recent years, if anything, and I'm not trying to ever be negative, but I kind of try to discourage people from competing only in the sense of, kind of talking to them about what you're talking about and what is their real motivator? What is the thing really driving them? If it's a sense of trying to get kudos from other people or praise from friends or whatever, that's really only going to carry you so far.
Exactly.
And not to be rude, but yeah, it's a kind of a shallow motivator. It doesn't speak to who you truly are. What you're doing really is trying to impress others with a persona, if you will, and saying, look, I can do it too. And end of the day, I think what every competitor or anyone who's thinking about competing needs to ask themselves, if they couldn't tell anybody else in the world that they were doing this, would they still want to do it?
100% agree.
Because that's really pushing yourself versus doing it for, external motivators. And that speaks a lot as to what you're willing to endure,
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's okay. Akash, go ahead.
Speaking of which, David, out of interest, what's been the hardest prep you've done and why?
I would definitely say 2012. In a lot of ways, I'll be blunt. 2012 kind of broke me in certain ways, and I came back from it. But I don't feel I ever. If I wouldn't have stumbled in 2012, I think I would have taken things further. So my wife and I competed in 2010, and it was her first time competing. It was 9 months after our daughter was born. I was literally working, 90-hour weeks for a year straight from 2009, 2010, 2011. My wife wanted to compete in 2011, so I, helped with supporting us, made that possible. And then I had spent all of 2011 off season. I got real heavy, up to 300 pounds. It was my first real off season using gear. So, I was an ox, I was inclining. I don't know kilos, but on bench press, I was inclining 405 for sets of 4, military pressing 3 plates for sets of 6, front squatting, 455 for sets of 6.
Oh, it's strong.
And then I was like November of 2011. I was supposed to start my prep in a couple weeks. I'd hired a coach, and my wife got a last minute invite to start her nursing program for school a semester early. And I knew that was our top priority. So I was already pretty much maxed out working the hours I was working. And I said, well, go ahead and do it. I'll make it work, which essentially meant, I had to get up even all the earlier, get our daughter fed and dressed, taken to daycare. And it made it so that I was running like 18 hours straight every single day for the better part of 6 months. Then 3 weeks into prep, I tore my right biceps off the bone carrying a treadmill for a work party. So I took and I was working so many hours at the time. I remember coming home from the work party. It was Saturday night, like 11 p.m., and I was pretty disheartened, obviously. And I looked at my wife and I said, well, at least I get to call in sick tomorrow so I can go to the emergency room. And that's how tired I was, and this was the beginning of prep. So that's not good. So I went, I had the surgery 4 days later, reattached it. Literally within 20 hours of the reattachment surgery, I was in the gym in a sling doing shoulders just my left side, doing 100-pound shoulder press and 60-pound laterals. There's video of it on my Facebook, so you can verify all that. I allowed myself one tiny cheat meal after tearing it just because I was mopey, and that was it. And then I just got right back to cardio, right back to training. And I ended up, what happened that season was for the first time I had self-doubt. I wasn't sure I could actually shoulder it all. And I'd conditioned myself to be so tough with all of it. Not to compare myself to Dorian because he's in a league of his own, but it's kind of the same thing where he tore his own body apart with his willpower.
Yeah.
When Dorian tore his biceps, he wasn't using bad form. He was actually using excellent form, but he had developed his will so strong that it was too much. His body couldn't keep up. I kind of did that mentally where I just put so much on my plate. I wasn't going to miss a client hour and put my family into a bad position. The business was growing. That was always my top priority over competing, because competing was just a fun little thing I did on the side. But as you know, competing, you can't do it less than 100%. You need to be all in if you're going to do well. So it was just too much on my plate. And because I was waffling with, unsure of, would I be able to get through this, I started cheating a little bit more at the end on the diet. And then I had to compensate by pushing even harder. Again, I ended up, my coach, we didn't get along. So I let him go after I tore the biceps. I felt like he was wasting his time. I did my own prep and, ended up having to come down really fast. The last 6 weeks were hell. I was dieting on nothing but, white fish and asparagus with an occasional handful of almonds just so I could survive. And I was doing an hour of high intensity cardio every day on the stepper split up. And I actually ended up doing a show that was earlier than planned, and I took the overall. It was the only overall I ever took. Wow. First year they had the NPC Woodbridge show in Virginia. The following week was the NPC Pittsburgh, which is a real big show because Pittsburgh is the home for the NPC. So the Pittsburgh has a real big history, and that's the show where they get all the top Olympia guys to guest pose at once.
Right. Yeah.
So all my friends had done that show. None had made top 5. I ended up placing 3rd in the Super, so that was a big accomplishment for me. Now, if I would have shut the prep down at that point, I'd been fine. But I had told friends I was going to do the Maryland State as well, which is 8 weeks later. So I was already trashed, and I dieted 8 more weeks. Did the Philly, took 2nd.
Damn.
And finally, the following week was Maryland, where I'd won the Super Heavies 2 years prior in 2010. My body was so burnt out by that point. I showed up, took 4th place, and it was more just the mental. I could stand the physical exhaustion. That's not the problem. The problem rather was I saw how I had my daughter was only 3 years old at the time. I was kind of pulling her by the hand to walk down the hall and throw her in daycare. And I started questioning, how much does this matter to me? Am I being a good father? Am I being a good husband? I could see that there was conflict there, that if I really wanted to pursue competition, at the top level, it was going to require, not being a great father, I don't want to say not being a great father, but not making it my top priority. Mm-hmm. So that was the first season that I had some doubt introduced. And after that season, I kind of shut down bodybuilding for 9 months, went through, some depression. And I felt like I couldn't balance career, family, and my hobby because my wife still wasn't working. When you're a personal trainer, it's 100% commission. There's no safety net. We're paying for our own health insurance, everything.
Yeah.
So it was the stress of that, and I stepped away for 9 months, and kind of just trained casually, ate casually. Even the stress of not having to eat on the clock, that helped a lot. And then finally, about a full year later, somewhere 2013, I said, all right, I have the itch. I need to go again. And that's when I contacted Matt Porter, and we started planning out a comeback for 2014.
When was the last show you did? Was it 2015 or was 14 the last year?
No, it was actually spring of 2016. I was planning on making 2016. So 2014, we had an excellent season. My wife competed with me first time since 2010, plus some of our close friends. And we ended up doing 3 shows, the last of which was the Emerald Cup in Seattle. So that was the other side of the country for me. My friend proposed to his now wife on stage, Steve Rolvestat and Rachel Pecoraro. Everything with that prep was perfect. It was just very taxing because, it's hard enough to prep for a show. But at that point, my wife was prepping with me, and our daughter would have been 5. Our daughter's 5 years old. So we're at the end of prep, and Matt Porter, if you know anything about him, like, he's brutal. He's going to push you beyond your limits.
I worked with him myself, actually, for a brief period. So
yeah,
it's tough.
His standards are as high as it gets, which is why he produces nothing but champions.
Yeah.
As well it should be. But at the same time, when you're 6 weeks out and you and your wife are both so tired that you're just laying on the couch, like, you don't want to get up, and your daughter says, let's go play ball. And you're like, oh, I can't move. Again, it just starts kind of weighing on the spirit, if you will. So for me, there was always a little conflict there. Because I'm such an all-in type of person, I realized that, hey, these are her years that are going to be her best years. And, you might well be kind of putting it on the sideline. So I decided my last season will be 2016. I've finally done well enough. I'd won like 7 or 8 class wins and 1 overall, and I was going to make a run at nationals. And, I had like 5 shows planned. So it was going to be a very, very tough season. And I got into it, and a lot of personal stuff was coming up, bad stuff. So I ended up only doing the 1 show, which is April 16, Woodbridge again, won the supers, not the overall. And actually shut my prep down early and said, you know what, it's time to step away now. So.
Yeah, I remember listening to that. You were still active on Geared Up back then, weren't you?
Yeah, I ended up doing Geared Up through that July of 16. And to be honest, at that point, like, totally blunt, the last year and a half, I've struggled with some depression. I'm finally getting it all sorted out, figured out. And it's funny. Well, it's not funny, I shouldn't say that, but I was listening to this last episode of Geared Up with the Gorilla Chemist while I was painting my daughter's bedroom. And, now Adam sounds like he's starting to deal with some of that. And Dave Smith has dealt with some of that. I think it's part and parcel, or it might be part and parcel of just being a very alpha male, if you will, that's trying to squeeze into modern society. There's not a lot of room right now for alpha males.
Yeah.
So kind of struggling to find that balance, but that's why I stepped away a little bit and made some changes to how I run my business. And put it this way, I worked those hours that I did, and I pushed myself as hard as I did to create an optimal environment for my family. And it's been a hard 6-7 years, but we're there now. I never had that opportunity growing up. I watched my dad work 60-hour weeks his whole life and run on 4 hours sleep. So I finally said, it's time to step back a little bit, just trying to be fit and healthy. And maybe when my daughter's 20 years old and I'm 52, I'll make a comeback and do some classic physique or something like that.
You're not planning on doing men's physique?
I don't know about men's physique. I carried, me, dude. I carried all of my lower body. So I don't see that panning out so well.
So talk us through Team Warrior Within. So you've busted ass, over the last 6-7 years, and now you're in a good position.
Sure.
So talk us through like how it started, how it's evolved, where the business is at now, where you see it going.
Sure. So it's funny, Team Warrior Within, there never was a Team Warrior Within. It was actually just, like I said, from 2004 through spring of 2010, my first 6 years, I worked as a personal trainer, and I just worked at fitness clubs, so I was an employee, didn't run my own business. I was actually fired from Lifetime Fitness in spring of 2010. You can imagine I don't really fit the corporate mold all that well. So, they've always struggled with me because, well, I always did. I was a high level performer, but I didn't necessarily have the attitude and the look and all that stuff that, the company wanted. So I can't blame them for that. I was always a little bit of a thorn in their side. But I learned a lot about business working there. So when I went independent spring of 2010, I had to start my own LLC, which I don't know if you have something similar in England, but it's basically, it's your own company so that you can't be sued if something goes wrong. And it was just David Johnston Training LLC, and that's still the LLC. So that was from 2010 through really probably fall of 2012 when things were starting to get like very visible. Social media was becoming more visible. My visibility and following had grown exponentially. And as funny as it sounds, there was 2 major reasons why I changed the public name from David Johnston Training to Team Warrior Within. The first was maybe a little bit of paranoia on my part. Similar to working for Lifetime Fitness, same goes with the NPC and the IFBB. All the promoters know that I bring really big teams, and I bring my competitors in great shape. We win a lot of overalls. We're very accomplished. But that I don't really toe the company line. I'm a little controversial in my views. I'm a little outspoken, probably not to the degree of Adam Mcvey. But at the same time, I don't play the game. I've been vocal about my opinion on bikini and on men's physique and kind of where the competitive side of all this has gone. And, to a certain degree, I've always kind of felt, I don't believe in the whole politics thing to the degree that everybody else does. I mean, hell, my people win a lot, and I'm not, I'm not exactly the judge's favorite person. But same time, if you're in the competition circle long enough, you know that there is something of an old boys club. So as silly as it sounds, I wanted to get my name off of it because, if, like Akash, you came to me originally to work with. If I'm prepping you for a show, I don't want my name attached to you if it's going to hurt you in any sense. I don't want there to be any bias. So I just tried to get behind the scenes a little bit more and let my work speak for itself, which is kind of contrary to how most people do it these days on social media.
It's commendable. You're taking the ego out of it.
Well, again, it's just, my business was already good at that point. And as silly as it sounds, I wasn't originally a prep coach. I was just a personal trainer. That's how I made my money. So I didn't need the accolades, if you will. And don't get me wrong, like when my people won or if I turned somebody pro, it felt great. I bragged, all that stuff. But that never drove what I did. It never drove the business. So that was part of the reason. And then the other reason is I was starting to mentor and train. Like a lot of the people that I trained for competition kind of fell in love with it so much that they wanted to start becoming personal trainers. They could start studying for their certifications and they would actually mentor under me. So I was starting to take on mentees at Coliseum Gym with the intention of kind of passing them some of my overflow. I had done the same thing at the chain gyms I'd worked at before, but now being independent, I had to make sure that they could meet my standards in terms of, knowing what they're doing with a client, knowing how they're talking to a client. And there's so many components, it's not just the physical training or the nutrition programming. It's getting in their head and knowing where their life is at. Are they fighting with their wife or their husband, or, how are their days going? All that stuff. Because if you want to be successful, that's key, not to be a motivational speaker, but you listen to someone like Tony Robbins or whoever, they're dead on. If you have no organization, you're not going to be able to get where you want to get. So I was mentoring all these other people. Well, the problem is then, Akash, say you come to me and say, hey, I want to work with you. I say, I can't take any clients. Clients would get angry if I tried to pass them to another trainer. They'd say, oh, it's David Johnston training. I only want to work with you. Yeah. So I had to kind of further depersonalize it and really work instead on just building an orientation towards training clients, rather than just my reputation. So that was the second reason. So it was really fall of 2012, maybe early 2013 that you started to see Team Warrior Within popping up more and more and more. Originally, I just had it printed up on some T-shirts and it kind of stuck. And at first, we just took on a couple trainers and they all worked out of Coliseum Gym. They all worked under me. And we had a really good team. And I think fall of 2012 was the first time I brought a really big competition team. I think there was 11 people at the NPC Sean Ray that fall in Baltimore, and they all did very well. And then by the next spring, March of 13 was the first year they had the NPC Gladiator in Baltimore. And then I had 13 people at that show that I prepped all of them. And it just started to be the case that every single show in Maryland or Virginia, I would have 10 or more competitors. I remember the 2015 Maryland State, there's 21 people that I personally had prepped. Wow. Like no other trainers. Yeah. And for the Jay Cutler show that fall in Baltimore, we ended up having 37 total competitors that were underneath Team Warrior Within. Now, I wasn't the only one who prepped them all. We had several prep coaches prepping them, but we entered something like 64 different divisions and, placed in all of them, taking almost every overall for the evening. So wow. At its peak, I ended up taking, I think in early 2015 or mid 2015, there's something like 20 trainers total who were working as a part of Team Warrior Within, all independent contractors. About half of them actually trained in person out of Coliseum Gym, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. The other half were spread out. As you know, Derek Natcher, Akashi, you worked with, he was in Pittsburgh, now he's down in Florida. With trainers in Virginia. Adam was taking clients in Chicago. Those would just be online clients, online coaching, whether competitors or just everyday people. And, in terms of visibility, we just try to keep, I never had a huge marketing plan or strategy. I don't have a business background, but I just try to keep it all authentic, so that nothing was photoshopped, nothing was glossy. you guys know I always aim for a little bit grittier approach, a little more real world approach, because to me, that's where my heart is, and that's the reality of the sport. When I would advertise client transformations, I always try to show up before and after, but I would also put stats up, like this is how long it took, this is how frequently they trained, this is how much weight they lost, to make it a little more real to people. So it wasn't just some, fancy advertisement, but it was actually educational and, gave people a little more faith that I wasn't just trying to sell them something, So it grew and grew and grew. And that was, really our peak as Team Warrior Within was probably late 2015, kept going strong into 2016. Unfortunately, early 2016, my wife and I were both in 2016. Everything was kind of a whirlwind, to be honest. Adam was in prep, Dave Smith was in prep, Derek was in prep, I was in prep. So we're all friends and we're all prepping with each other, but we're also kind of in competition with each other. You know what I mean? So we're all kind of like looking over our shoulder, and it can be a positive thing, but it can be a stressful thing as well. Because now with more visibility, people expect so much of you, and competition was never my primary thing. Early in 2016, one of our trainers passed. He was a young kid, Chris Pisarcik. He had a liver transplant the previous summer and done well, but then was having trouble with the recovery process for a full 7-8 months later. Ended up having to go back for a couple surgeries. So he passed when I was a couple months into prep. I had turned his wife pro the previous fall at National, so she was like family. And we went to the funeral, and Dave Smith was his best friend. So I'm there trying to be there for Dave Smith and for his wife, So it was just a lot of stuff that hit early in 2016. We were trying to kind of branch out into so many business ventures. We got the invitation to franchise into a Retro Fitness, which is a chain gym. And, had I stepped back from training at that point and just tried to manage, it probably would have been fine. But I was trying to train probably 70 client hours a week while writing 4 blogs a week, while doing my own contest prep. My wife was in prep. All my friends were in prep. It was, just unfortunately, I had started to believe in my own invincibility, if you will. Kind of like I said with Dorian, where he tore his own body apart. I kind of tore my brain apart in a sense by just piling it on and saying, no matter what you give me, I can tear apart. I can take it. And some of that, to be honest, I talked about the chip on your shoulder that you need to you don't necessarily need, but that a lot of us use to be good at competition. Well, my chip had grown so severe because, watching all the bikini competitors and men's physique competitors and, 365, 24/7, they're all claiming that they're the toughest dog in the pack, if you will. And I kind of knew what I'd been through and knew what I was capable of. So I developed this fuck all of you attitude, just stack it on. Nothing's going to stop me. Well, it stopped me. So my prep ended up short-circuiting a little early in 2016. For the first time in a decade, I stepped out of the gym and just worked from home, online coaching, and kind of needed a breather. And we still had a lot of the trainers working under us. I worked from home that second half of 2016, came back to the gym first half of 2017. And then we moved up to Rhode Island this past summer, my wife and I. So, a lot of Team Warrior Within trainers, to be honest, I think they had a misunderstanding, or maybe I wasn't clear in what I wanted to do. My goal was just to give them a platform because we already had a lot of visibility and name. And then, any extra clients that we were getting or overflow, we would go ahead and pass along to the trainers that we really trusted. Again, Akash, you work with Derek. So, Derek Natcher runs his own company, which is Loud Performance, and he owns a gym down in Florida. I'm not looking to build his business for him. That's his responsibility. But if I have more visibility than him and I'm getting too many clients to handle, I trust Derek. I know how good his work is. So I gladly pass it on to him. And if he grows all the more for it, that's excellent. I'm very close friends with his fiance, Silda. I prepped her for several seasons. Okay. That was kind of the point, was to have a family network where everyone who was a part of it was either someone I had trained, somebody that I was really close friends with and could trust, like Adam. We didn't want to just invite in jokers and turn it into some big, hoopla. We wanted to be kind of a family network. And it really was. It really worked great for a while. But, I just probably wasn't primed yet to lead a company, if you will. I was still too vested in just doing my own thing. So it was hard to keep that together, if you will. So it's still there. And we still have, I want to say 5 contractors besides Nikki and myself. So there's about 8 of us total. But as you know, we don't really push on social media. We don't really try to get a lot of visibility. And to be blunt, it's because I still have more referrals than I can really take, So I experimented in 2015. I did the social media thing. I shared everything. I liked everything. I commented. I blogged endlessly. Then in 2016, I said, all right, now I'm going to step back and see how much of a difference it makes. And when I stopped doing all that, there was not a lot of difference. I still have, because the people that are seeing good results are very proud. They want to share it. They want to show it off to the world, and then they'll tag you on it. That's really kind of all the visibility I need to keep it going as it is, So that's where we're at now. I've toned it down a little bit just because, my daughter's going to be 9 years old, and I'm enjoying going to the park with her and playing with her more than getting into arguments about board shorts and steroid doses. So,
do you plan to keep Team Warrior within a lot smaller now and a lot more compact compared to how it was? 20 trainers or so.
Yeah, first of all, it's not really intentional, but it has gone that way just naturally. In part, when we left Maryland, I'm still friends with other people back there, but we don't have that centralized, 10 people all in the gym that are talking to each other every day. So the 2 people there that I've worked with for years, they stayed on. They're still taking clients from us. Some of the other trainers that were there decided they just want to try to push their own thing for a while. And, I'm completely fine with that, because before, insofar as we were investing money into the company, was for website hosting and a little bit for the, advertising and whatnot. So we do some of that. Now the individuals that want to do their own thing, they're going to have to do that on their own. And that's fine. My wife and I are in a really comfortable position with where we're at. To be blunt, like if we could sustain this for the next 10 years, it's not that hard, but this is the first time. I was doing the math the other day with my wife. I'm 38 years old. In 20 years since I turned 18, I haven't worked less than a 60-hour work week. And that includes like when you take vacations and, because I take my clients with me on vacation and work on laptop. So this is the first time, I purposely stepped back a little bit. That's why I'm not doing my own podcast right now. I had that up until about 6 weeks ago, but, I'm just really enjoying being a little more normal, if you will, for the first time, just training to be fit, not worrying about, optimal supplementation, eating healthy, eating clean, just trying to listen to a lot more. You know what? Here's what it is. A lot of intelligent people have come before us, and I try to listen to them. I don't know if you guys listened to the last episode on Geared Up with the Gorilla Chemist, but they have been talking about what's your identity going to be when you're not the biggest guy in the gym? Yeah. You know what I mean? They were all talking about that. I've already kind of been dealing with that for the last 2 to 3 years, because I knew it was coming. I knew prior to my season in 2016, I was 36 years old, and I was hitting a squat about 600 pounds. I pushed gear as hard as I was comfortable with pushing it. And I knew that that's what it was going to take to be a national level guy. And I just knew at that age, like I'm almost 40, my daughter's coming up on 10 years old. It just wasn't the right time to make a run. I started lifting late in life. I already had a couple surgeries. So I knew the hardest part of all this would be grappling with your identity, so to speak, when you step away from being an upper level competitor, and how are you going to adjust to that? So watching a lot of the Dorian stuff, and, he went through his depression too, before he could kind of find out that life balance that he needed. And it's something I think every competitor that really is invested is probably going to have to deal with at some point in their career. Because if not, you've seen what happens. They keep doing it until they're dead,
Yeah. So here's a question for you, Dave. You've done all these crazy hours, and, as you've said, sort of almost torn your brain apart. Would you do it differently? Or do you think to be in this comfortable position that you're at now, would you do it again?
So, certain things I'd have done differently. Overall, I don't know that I could have done it differently, because that's kind of who I am. That's my personality. When I do something, I do it. And all my friends will tell you that. Everyone says that. If you go to 100 people in the gym and ask them, do you train as hard as you can? They'll all say, yeah, but it'll be a real casual, yeah. Mine would be a grim stare and would be like, you fucking know that I do. And I don't know if I want to say that, but either way, that would be the response, People know that if I say something's going to get done, they can bet on it. And even as a little kid, I was 5 years old, and my dad's nickname for me was the Bulldog. because when I got something, I used to love the British Bulldog wrestlers, and I get something in my head, nothing short of a brick wall is going to stop me from marching through it. The only thing that I really wish I would have caught earlier was just, I'll be blunt, like I'm not good at the interpersonal reaction component. And the more you listen to podcasts and read up on this, you see that's pretty common. People who are really good at pushing themselves and holding themselves to a high standard are not good at dealing with people who are not. And that can lead to a lot of resentment or conflict or, so over the years as a trainer, I'm super proud of, where I got a lot of people, but there's definitely instances where I had to go back years later and apologize to people and say, I was probably a little over the top. And the funny thing is when I did that, they all said, you know what? I know you, I understand completely. You did exactly what you had to do. But at the same time, like if you piss someone off to the point where you don't talk to them for 2 years or whatever, that can be sad, when you look back in retrospect. So certain things I wish I'd have done better, just in terms of communicating with people. But the problem is when you're a Sherman tank that's on a mission and everybody's kind of like following in your wake, most of the benefit is good. Most of the people who became part of Team Warrior Within or became one of our clients or whatever, we did a lot of good for a lot of people, man, hundreds of people, where we just totally changed their perspective or changed their fitness levels or pulled 200 pounds off of somebody. I mean, that's major. Nowadays with my coaching, I have a lot of clients where it is fitness related, but it's almost as much life coaching. My client Sean just recently tore his right biceps and he's a fireman. He wants to compete later this year. Well, I did that. So I can step him through every stage, not only physically, but psychologically, kind of where he needs to be and what he needs to do to maximize his chances of not slipping backwards, so to speak. Or I have a young client this year who had thyroid cancer and, he can't train optimally, needless to say, but he needs someone there to step him through and keep him grounded. And that's really gratifying. So I kind of wish that I'd had, I wish I had believed I was invincible, if that makes sense, just because if I'd have backed it down a little bit earlier, I probably could have had a better run with everything. But at the same time, I mean, you can't sit there and live in regret about that. I learned so much about business and put it this way. I keep saying I'm 38, so I'm old, but that's still pretty young. So the next business will be run all the better, put it that way.
Do you think with the interpersonal relationships, is that more about managing expectations with your team and your other members of Team Warrior Within? Or
you know what I really think it comes down to is talking to people more and saying, what are you really after? I'm the type of person where if I do something, like I said, I want to know that I'm giving it my all. I don't want to say be the best because you can't control that, but I want to be the best that I can be. All right. I want to continue to be striving. And that's always been my orientation. I told you I hung out with a lot of heavy metal burnout kids when I was younger. They're people that I care about, but they're people that didn't have aspirations. They're people who were happy to hit 18 years old and then just have a cold beer in the fridge and work a blue collar job for the rest of their life and never see the world, live in their hometown until they died. You know what I mean? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but I wanted something more. I wanted something bigger and greater. I want to change my mind, my physique. I want to see the world and, kind of get out of that position.
It's hard to relate to those people, right?
It is. But, what's funny is the realization, like not everybody has great aspirations.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really comfortable living a life where, as long as they get their vacation once a year and there's food in the fridge and they get to watch TV at night, they're a pretty happy individual. And my problem was just always assuming like everybody wants to be quote unquote successful, whether that's economically or physically or whatever. I became a bulldozer, kind of like clearing the path for everyone to go along. Well, not everybody wants to walk that path. So I think that's a major thing as you get older, just getting wise. And the hard thing is not being judgmental about that because going geared up and read the threads, every person knows every answer. You know what I mean? For every other person. And there's a whole big degree of not stepping back and saying, all right, well, there's some wiggle room in here. You can just take supplements, you can push stuff harder. You can push stuff less hard. What's your big picture? What's your long-term goal? Like if I have a client come to me and they're, especially if they're younger and say they want to, start up on gear, I'd make them talk to me for a full week or two before we, go that route. Talk about what are your plans with kids and what are your plans with okay, I know right now you don't want to have kids, but at the same time, you're 24 years old. That might change. You might find a perfect woman, and now you can't have kids, and she hates you. Like, I've seen that. And it's a terrible position. So really stop and make people think through, some of their bigger decisions. Running one small cycle isn't going to hurt anybody long term, but it's more the principle of it. Where do you see this going? And are you doing what you can to be smart for not only the short term, but the long term?
Interesting.
Speaking of training hard, one of the things I learned from you was the ability to bring everything together to failure at once during a set. I think I remember talking about this. Describe this thought process for the listeners here in how they should approach their sets. When the money maker sets come along in the workouts, what kind of sets do they approach here?
Well, that's something, what you're really talking about is focused intensity, if you will. And for those that aren't like avid lifters, you can take an analogy with studying. A lot of time when you're reading a book and studying a book, half the time you find yourself distracted and thinking about other stuff, and you can't really even remember what you just read. Versus setting up an optimal environment so that when you go in, everything stays programmed in your brain. And for some people, that, like me, I find that I remember stuff better if I actually engage with the reading while I'm reading it. So I write and take notes. If I take notes while I read something, I remember it almost, verbatim. For everyone's going to be a little different. But either way, it's about, don't just go in and study, but have focused, concentrated studying. It's going to be optimal. Same thing with your training. And, what really helped me a lot, I had kind of a cheat sheet because I trained clients. So I got to see hundreds of examples of intensity or lack thereof right before my eyes, and actually kind of learn the mechanics of intensity, if you will. I think the number one problem that a lot of people have, they think of intensity as some mystical thing. You know what I mean? Like, some people like Dorian are just intense and other people just aren't intense. I think there's a personality component for sure, but you can look at the physiological aspects that contribute to intensity, like breathing tempo, cadence, stuff like that. And you can actually train yourself to become a more intense lifter. So even stuff I would do with clients, like I found certain clients when they hit a certain pain threshold, just their form fell apart no matter what. They couldn't kind of bear down and work through it.
Yeah.
So then I'd have them pause the rep at the stretch point, for a moment to remove any momentum, or use a physical marker like putting a box below your butt when you're doing a squat to make sure that depth stays consistent, or actually counting your tempo on your negative, which again, the beginning of the set, it doesn't matter. What matters is at the end of the set. But I think the best way you can see this is with like leg training, whether it's a hack squat or a leg press. We have someone doing a real hard set, so they have to really breathe heavy and really exert on every single rep. Kind of watch how many reps they're shooting for and at what point they pause during the set. Like, let's say you're trying to do a set of 10 reps with a heavy hack squat. And let's say you unrack the weight and you get 3 reps in and you pause. All right, well, you're not even halfway. You know what I mean? So you're kind of treating it as an extended rest pause set, and you're psyching yourself up so much for every rep. Another means of progressing your intensity over time is how many consecutive reps you get in a row before you pause. Because what you're doing is modifying your breathing cadence, and you're kind of extending out. You're learning to better measure. You gotta get that. What you're doing is you're learning to better measure how far you could go before you truly hit momentary failure. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times it feels like you're gonna hit, but you're not really. So I found over the years what I did was I've used Dorian's template a couple times, and I also used to do straight DC training 3 days a week, half body workouts for a long time. So both those methods really prime you for learning to train to failure and training with higher intensity and lower volume. During my last couple of years when the weights got really, really heavy, I found so much of bringing that intensity was kind of the meditation before the set. I still to this day love watching the blood and guts scenes where Dorian is walking up to the pullover, not actually doing the pullover, but his little like striding towards it, and it looks like he's going to rip the machine apart, before he even gets near it. And I would try to inculcate that with my clients as well. Let them know, like, when you touch the machine or when you touch the weight, you're now at war. Like, this thing is trying to beat you. So like I wouldn't let my clients sit on a leg press between sets. You see a lot of trainers do that. They do their set and the client just lays there while the trainer talks. I say, get up, walk away. I want you to fucking hate this machine. And when you walk towards it, I want you to walk towards it like you're trying to bend the steel on the machine. You know what I mean? A lot of it's just a mindset. You know, when you're there to train, you're not casual. Even over the years, my wife and I trained together, like for the most part, we didn't talk. We wore headphones and we communicated with hand signals. You know very well it's hard for a husband and wife to train together because it's a tense environment and it's easy to start like getting a little angry at your partner or whatever.
Yeah.
By just taking yourself out of the chatting, taking yourself out of the, communicating. Insofar as we communicated, it was about training and talking about stuff like groceries or dinner or this weekend or whatever. That waited until afterwards because our head was focused there. I wouldn't bring my cell phone with when I trained. The only time I did that was when my wife was like 2 weeks away from giving birth. But I figure, you're a slave to your cell phone the rest of the day. I'm going to take that hour and a half a day and just put it away. And to this day, I still listen to an iPod when I train instead of my phone, because the temptation is there. The temptation to start screwing around in between sets and checking your IG and checking your voicemail. You know what I mean? Everyone does it. I'm guilty of it too. It's an addictive facilitator. I figure why do that in the first place? Just leave in the car, So everything that I could do. Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to aim at removing external distraction and making sure with how much I already had on my plate. I go back and listen to the Dorian interviews. Dude was a monster, but he also didn't have that on his plate. He was showing up and making sure Temple ran smoothly, and then he was just getting the training. With all I had on my plate, I knew that for that hour and a half, I had to remove all external distractions and just focus on the task at hand. So, and the other thing too, I logged my workouts in a logbook for years, starting in 2003 or 2003. And I did that all the way until I saw my biceps in 2012. So for 9 years straight, I logged all my workouts, all my nutrition, just knowing that it was a very objective way to help push myself a little bit harder.
I love this psychology side of it.
I think there's great points there for our clients.
Yeah, I'm hoping that our clients can take some of this on board. It would be great. Yeah,
because one of the limiting factors with online training is managing their intensity, right? So if these sorts of points are good mental notes for them to have going into these big sets, so that they extract the most out of each set, right?
And I'll give a little credit there. You guys all know who Phil Viz is.
Yeah.
We're acquaintances, not great buddies, but I notice he does pretty much all online coaching with upper level bodybuilders, and he'll make them film like their peak set, film your heaviest set of squats, send it over. So when I moved to Rhode Island about 8 months ago, and started doing only online, I started doing that with more clients, especially with just more everyday clients, because I know that the people who are pretty hyper advanced already kind of know what they're doing, and I'll only make them film if they have a lagging body part because I need to see their form and may correct it. But with everyday clients, I'll say, look, film your top set of squats, film your top set of rack pulls. And then I'll give feedback not only on mechanics, but on intensity as well, and it's a difficult thing to do. But I will, reference some of my own videos and send it over as a link and say, look, I know you're not going to squat 500 pounds. I'm not trying to turn this into a comparison. But at the same time, insofar as I can move you in this direction, we know that your progress is going to move in this direction, right?
Yeah.
So don't take it as a comparison, just take it as instructional. And I send out a lot of videos of John Meadows or whatever, but I will, I'll find videos that demonstrate intensity really well. Obviously, Dorian is the best there. And say, watch the tempo, watch his face, watch his breathing pattern. That's not just done for dramatic theatrics. It's done because, and the other thing too, compare it to other sports. Like, let's say, how you breathe when you perform Valsalva and you grunt during a set. I'll say, watch a tennis match. When those female players hit the tennis ball, you hear them go, ugh. Or a boxing match, when they box, they'll go, they breathe like that.
Yeah.
And explaining what that does for the body, how it allows you to generate more force and all that stuff. So insofar as you can demystify the process and turn it into more of a mechanical process, I think it takes people's, people don't get offended that way. They understand that you're not talking about them being wimpy. You're talking about, hey, if you adopt this is part of your form, not just lifting the weight, but how you lift the weight, how you breathe, all that stuff. It'll improve them as weightlifters, and they'll see better results. So
definitely. So Dave, no problem if you don't want to go into detail on this one, but just to indulge Akash and I a little, we've been big fans of Geared Up. I mean, I was a fan of it for pretty much since it started. And then when Akash and I sort of became colleagues, I said to him, well, you should check out this podcast. It's amazing. I still listen to it, but the direction of it has completely changed. You and Adam just had like a great dynamic, where he doesn't take things seriously and he just speaks his mind. There's no filter. But then you brought sort of that serious edge to it.
Grounding.
Yeah. It was a really cool dynamic to listen to. If you don't mind, can you explain sort of like roughly what went on there? What made you change direction in terms of podcasting? And
sure. And for the record, it's funny. I've never actually told this in public. A lot of my friends know, but if Adam's listening, I don't think he'll take offense to any of this. I'm sure he'd agree with all of it. But from the very inception, I was pretty much at my capacity, as he knew, and so he told me that he was really good with he would run everything. I would show up and record. I was fine with that. And then a couple months in, I started helping to write the outline, which wasn't really complicated. It took maybe half hour to 40 minutes every week, but overall, I loved doing the show because, it allowed me to speak to a lot of people that were my heroes and idols, including Dorian Yates, Kevin Lebroni, Frank Zane, and learn a lot. And, then third of all, it helped keep me even more visible in the public, which complemented what I was growing. So, Adam always did everything with the social media. Adam did everything with setting up the sponsors. We never even had a conversation like how much he was earning from that, but I'm sure he did well, because he worked hard. He busted his ass doing that. It just wasn't something I was interested in doing, the social media stuff. And because I was already too busy doing what I was doing, and I loved doing what I was doing, really. Now this is, again, Adam listening, I'm sure he'd agree with this. Adam and I both come from a somewhat similar background, not a great background. We both worked hard to get where we're at. The difference between Adam and I think that I've always had this view that my life deserves to be better, meaning like I don't want to stay trapped in my hometown. I don't want to stay in a vicious cycle, if you will. Adam has a little more of that vicious cycle aspect to him. So what happened was, it was funny when my wife and I got married in 2008. We moved out to Maryland. She got pregnant. I told Adam, and I said, please don't tell anybody. We want it to be a surprise. Well, sure enough, he told her brother. Before we got home for Christmas, it led to a big fight. And I said to Adam, you're just trouble. Like anytime I'm around you, something bad happens, so I'm done.
Yeah.
And I didn't talk to Adam from fall of 2008 until I think early 2012. I was growing what I was growing in Maryland, and he was doing his own thing. And then he saw the pictures from when I was prepping in 2012, and I had, I won the super heavyweights for the first time in 2010. 2012, I was making some really serious improvements as a bodybuilder, and he had prepped for a Napa show that year, I believe. And he saw my pictures, and he was very complimentary. He said, wow, man, you're really doing it. It'd been like 3 years, so we didn't have any hard feelings, or I wasn't really mad at him for, what happened in 2008. It was more just, look, everywhere you go, trouble follows. So I'm just going to do my own thing. And you guys have kind of seen that. Like, that's absolutely true.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Right.
He's an entertaining guy to listen to, but yeah.
Adam, we're both a little self-destructive. The difference being I'll step back when it gets too bad and say, all right, we need to shift gears. This isn't working. He kind of doesn't have he kind of revels in it a little more and takes it too far. Luckily, he's never been in serious trouble yet, never in jail or anything. And I hope he never does, because I love the kid. But when we started talking in early 2012, and I kept eyes on his show and he on mine, and, established some rapport, and it was all good. And then I think 2013, he reached out and he was going to do this NPC show. And I had started prepping a lot more people and really kind of making a name for myself. And in 2013, Adam started getting on this really positive path where he is working through all of his legal problems from the DUIs that he had. He had got arrested once for fighting. He was putting in all this work so that he could get back shared custody of his first daughter, Addison. And, his attitude was different. He was kind of changed for the better and really started like saying, man, things are possible when you are positive and blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, dude, like life ain't bad. Let's go. Let's do this. So I helped prep him in 2013. He won the light heavies for the Mid-Illinois March 13. My daughter and I flew out from Maryland, Chicago to watch, supported him. And then he had started doing the first podcast with Eric Paul, I think the Elite Physique Report. Lasted for a while, didn't go great because Eric wanted to make it more of a politically correct NPC show. Adam wanted to go in a wild direction. So Adam hit me up in fall 13, said, hey, you want to do this? I said, sure. No, we did it. And the thing is, as it was growing, I started seeing that Geared Up had like a really positive impact and a lot of visibility. It was when I did the Emerald Cup in spring of 14, and I flew out to Seattle, and it has a big expo attached to it. And the minute I walked in, like, I heard, whoa, David Johnston, and people were calling me over and giving me free samples, and I was kind of blown away that we had that visibility in the community. So it was actually that fall, we went to Nationals, November of 14, Adam and I, and we're sitting in the audience, and, Steve Bleckman, who's the editor for Muscular Development, was sitting 2 rows in front of us, and Dave Palumbo, and I said, hey, why don't we go introduce ourselves, who knows, maybe they'll want to syndicate the podcast or whatever. And Adam being Adam said, screw that, I'm not selling out. I don't want to talk to those jokers. I said, Adam, you can at least introduce yourself. Like,
Yeah.
Who knows? They offer you something and you don't like it, you don't have to take it, but just kind of Adam being Adam, standoffish and wanting to do his own thing. And I understand. So I said, fine. So we kept doing the podcast, had a good time with it. But again, going into 2016, just everything was at a head in terms of how busy I was, my client, my trainer who passed in February of 16, Dave Smith becoming a part of Team Warrior Within, Adam was a part of Team Warrior Within. Things were growing. So we had the first pro show in Baltimore, which was the IFBB Baltimore Pro in July of 16. And Sean Ray had told the promoter of that show, hey, call David. He knows everybody in Maryland and Delaware. He can help you to spread the word, right? So we did a big seminar at my gym with Sean Ray, Kevin Lebroni, Freddie Smalls. Invested a lot trying to get this thing off.
To that on the podcast, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And so, again, it was one more project that I was trying to organize. I'm not a show promoter, but I was trying to help the show promoter. Put it this way, it was a big bodybuilding show that had a high prize money attached to it. So I wanted to see it do well,
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to help promote the show. And then the day after the show, do a seminar at my gym featuring Victor Martinez and Akeem Williams. And, we did the show. Like, Adam came out from Chicago. Dave Smith came down from Pittsburgh. My mother and my brother happened to be in town for the week just for vacation. We went to the pro show the day prior. And then the day of the seminar, which was a Sunday, happened to be my daughter's birthday. It was her 6th birthday. But we were committed to doing the seminar, so we had to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I wake up early and everyone's ready to go. My brother, who has no connection to bodybuilding at all, he's ready to go move squat racks and shit. Everyone's ready. Adam had gone out the night before drinking with one of my clients, cheating on his second wife. And the morning of was completely hungover, not ready to go. And at that stage, to be honest, I was just so sick of the scene. I was so sick of, unfortunately, everyone in I won't say everyone, but a lot of people in the bodybuilding world are very interested in just doing their thing and not kind of driving bodybuilding proper.
Mm-hmm.
And I had really felt like we were trying to build bodybuilding. You know what I mean? Like, let's spread bodybuilding and keep it alive. Its numbers seem to be falling and all this stuff. He was the one person who didn't show up. He ended up showing up several hours later, but by that point, honestly, to do that, it was my daughter's birthday and I was there on a Sunday working, and I'm like, it was just too much for me. I at that point, and the funny thing is, I was really resentful for a long time. That's why I tried doing, podcasts right out of the gate. I'm like, I'm going to bury Geared Up, and then realized I just didn't care that much. I didn't want to make that the focal point of why I was doing things. In the past year, I've actually reached out to Adam twice, and the last time was a couple weeks ago. And I just told him straight up, I said, hey, man, I hope you're in a good spot. I see the pictures that you post of your daughter, and I think they're gorgeous. We've both been through a lot, but just know that I hope you're doing well. And he said, I'll hit you back up when I get to work. He didn't hit me back up. So that's that. I don't harbor any resentment towards him. I hope he's taking care of his daughters, and I hope he's in a good spot, because it's interesting. I can see his journey from a distance because he posts so much and Geared Up. I don't listen to Geared Up regularly, but I listened to this last week. He's going through so much of the same stuff that I've gone through. The difference being he's doing it in public, and in a sense that makes it harder. because you have your ego involved, and if you need to suffer a little bit, it's hard to suffer in public, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I sincerely hope he's doing well, and he does everything he needs to do to be the best dad he can be and take care of himself. Because I'll tell you what, straight up, Adam is a smart dude. Like, he didn't go to college, nothing like that. He and I are both intelligent guys, but he's a smart guy. He's a quick guy. It's just the chip on his shoulder is so severe that it holds him back at times, because when he decides to turn it on and do good, dude, look at the Geared Up Forum and look how positive it was for so long. Look at the Gathering of the Good Guys thing that he organized in Connecticut. He has amazing potential. He shoots himself in the foot a lot, and he'd probably say the same thing about me. He'd say that I was an academic dweeb and I don't know how life really works, etc. But, whatever. As long as he's staying out of jail, more power to him.
Thank you. It's refreshing, just getting the real deal with that, because, as I said, like I still listen to it from time to time. But I mean, I remember Akash and I, when we were going through our preps, like we would text each other as soon as the episode was up with you guys. That would keep me going through cardio.
Every Tuesday morning it used to come out, right?
Oh, you're making me feel bad now.
Every Tuesday morning it'd come out, and it'd be 3 hours long. So that'd keep you going for 4 or 5 days of cardio.
Yeah, it was perfect. We'd be sending each other like quotes back and forward from the episode and talking about it. And we were working at a gym in London at the time, and there were quite a few of the other trainers from the other branches that would even message me and go, "Did you check out this week's Geared Up?"
Yeah.
So between the two of you, you built something cool, and as you said, like he just seems to have this kind of self-destruct button. I mean, I don't know, but that's how it comes.
I think one of the worst things we could have done was all prepping at the same time, because like when I prepped in 14, Adam wasn't in prep. And you'll notice, like, I ended up missing the one episode with Fuad Abiad that year. And it was because I was doing the New York Metropolitan that weekend. I had like 36 hours straight awake, hadn't slept. And I was trying to text Adam. I couldn't get home. I got pissed off. I finally found out that he had broken his phone and got a new phone. And so, like, he wasn't getting my text. But other than that, like, even during my prep, I never missed an episode. Then in 2016 with Adam prepping, like, he ended up missing a couple because he was so run down. And, the funny thing is, when you got like 4 or 5 people all in prep, I hate to say it, like, it's a miserable experience because none of you's like super happy. None of you has a ton of energy. None of you is looking at the good side of things. If you got 4 guys on trend, on no sleep, on clamp, like, it probably was a bad idea.
And there's not a lot going on like in general life either, is there? Because when you're prepping, let's be honest, right? It's routine. It's putting one foot in front of the other, and it's keeping all the variables the same. So when there's all of you prepping, all doing the same stuff daily, I guess it's kind of hard to find something exciting to talk about as well.
Well, there's that. Plus, like, I think all of us were and still are fairly dissatisfied with the direction the whole industry had gone. So we did nothing at that point but get together and like dwell on negativity at a time when we needed to be dwelling on something that would lift us up. And there was no one in the group that had what it took to lift us up, because I was taxed, Adam was taxed, Dave Smith was taxed. I was also prepping God knows how many other people for shows that season. So, not only is your cup empty, but everyone is trying to get you to pour out more into them. And just, it was a bad idea. It was interesting, but it ended up being, not fun. I'd get through, here's how it would go. Like, Sunday would be the night that we would record, and we'd record at 8 p.m. I would start my Sundays. I usually was in the gym at 5 a.m. to do fasted cardio. About 6 a.m. We would run our posing clinic at 7:30. So then from 7:30 to 9, I would pose with competitors. Then I would train clients from 9 till about 3. Then about 4 o'clock, our buddy would show up, and we would go through our second leg workout. So me, my wife, and like 2 other people. We train legs from like 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. You go pick up my daughter. I'd get home at 7 p.m. I'd have an hour, and then I'd have to record Geared Up for 3 hours until 11 p.m. So now at that point, you're pushing basically from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. So what is that? 12 plus another 18-hour day. It just once I was put into a position where I felt like I was willing to be there for it no matter what, but he wasn't willing to be there back no matter what. That's when I said, okay, I can't, make my daughter go through that on Sunday evenings and not be there if there isn't some reciprocity there. And I just felt the reciprocity wasn't there at that point.
Yeah, especially I guess if, and I know you said that this didn't matter too much to you, but if he's the one that's, profiting from it at the end of the day and receiving the bottom line, really he should be the one that's there through thick and thin. I know you said that for you, you were comfortable with the other stuff and you like just turning up, but still out
Right.
of everyone on that podcast, he should be the one there missing the daughter's birthday. He should be the one turning
Sure.
up.
And and to be totally clear, I was mad that he wasn't there for a Team Warrior Within event. But still, it was the same thing. It just got to show, like, when shit hits the fan, who's there to step up and who isn't. And it could have just been because he was so deep into prep that he just felt like crap and couldn't do it or whatever. But it didn't matter to me. You know what I mean? Like, I needed you for a day, and you were the one person out of everybody that decided there was another priority. That's fine. And I love Geared Up, and it was heartbreaking for me because I knew how many people loved the show. So that was the hard part for me.
That's essentially about yourself and Team Warrior Within, right? So
yeah, well, and that was the point, because I wasn't making money doing it. If I had to cut something out, that was going to be the thing that I cut out. Only because if it's a question of time for my family or time for something that's kind of a side project, at that point, family's going to win. So
100%. Well, a big thanks for keeping us going through those cardio sessions for the time that you were on it. We learned a ton.
Absolutely, and I hope
it was great.
Hope you got something out. I hope you got something out of the Beyond Driven ones I did earlier or later. 2017.
Yeah, we got those.
I had a lot of fun with some of those. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for all of that. Let's start wrapping this up with a few rapid fire questions. So
sure.
Fast forward. Say this is now. Your daughter's grown up. Say you and your wife decide to start prepping again at the same time. What would be your go-to cheat meals?
Sushi has always been the go-to because we can both agree with it. It's simple and it's fairly clean. So sushi.
Perfect. I like it. Favorite drink in terms of alcoholic?
Believe it or not, I don't really drink alcohol. Once or twice a year. I'm just not a huge fan, not on principle, but it just makes me really tired given the work hours that I always work. But if I had to do it, it'd probably be rum and Diet Coke or Jack Daniels and Diet Coke.
Perfect. And the last question, who should we have on our podcast next? Who do you enjoy listening to?
Ooh. Well, again, that Dorian is always the dude, just because, man, some of the stuff that he's coming out with now, I feel like he's 10 years ahead of all of us. So we just kind of got to watch his trajectory and see where it goes.
So did you say Dorian? Did you say Dorian?
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy. He's the most interesting guy in the whole, stinking fitness world, as far as I'm concerned. Besides that, competition-wise, I never went back and listened to this most recent Ruley interview that they did on muscular development with the round line, but I think Ruley's an interesting guy just because I want to hear, his mentality. I watched him from the Arnold Amateur all the way up to where he's at now, and I think he's the one person that could push for the crown. So he'd be interesting to talk to. And then if you could get him to settle down and speak transparently, Phil Heath would always be a good choice. But you don't really have to break him down. So
yeah, awesome. Great recommendations there. Thank you. Okay, Dave. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for, as I said, all the podcasts you've done previously, all the information and wisdom that Akash and I have gleaned off of you, even without you knowing directly. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Any closing notes, Akash?
I'm happy to hear.
No, thank you, David. I mean, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be working with Derek right now. And he's been great for the past 2 years, and I'll be renewing again for another year. So it's been great.
That's great. We're actually planning on going out to visit him and his fiancee Silda, hopefully in the next few months, and see their gym. So
nice.
Cool that the family is still there, even though we're in hiding a little bit. Still going strong. So excellent to hear.
Great.
Awesome.
Let's just finish this up with you just telling people where they can find you. For those that haven't, as I said, listened to Geared Up and followed you via that route, what's the best way for people to get in touch and find out what you're doing at the moment?
Sure. You can always go to www.teamwarriorwithin.com, Facebook, Team Warrior Within fan page, same with Instagram. I live and die by my email, so very simple, David Johnston Training, all one word, @gmail.com. David Johnston Training @gmail. So between those sources, trust me, you can get a hold of me and I'll get back to you pretty rapidly.
Perfect. Akash, do you want to do the outro?
Sure. You can find us on www.rntfitness.com or Instagram at rnt_fitness. My personal page is @Akash Fagala, and you can find Adam at Adam Haley with the number 1 at the end.
Nailed it. Thanks again, Dave. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Dave.
You guys too.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.